I want to take a quick look and give my thoughts on the new lottery system that was confirmed last week via a vote. 29 owners voting yes, one voter in the Memphis Grizzlies voting no. But for those of you who don't know, it's basically a 3-2-1 system where three balls in the lottery machine are given to the bottom 4 through 10 teams. So those 4 through 10 teams get three chances at a number one pick. Two balls for the bottom three teams. So the three biggest tankers or the three, worst teams in the NBA, however you want to look at it, depends on the year. Those teams getting two balls, and then two balls for a play-in team, and one ball for the 7 and 8 play-in losers, right? My first thoughts on this are obviously something had to be done because half the league almost was taken this year. It was a miserable watch if you were watching, every game from a just love of the game standpoint to watch these teams put out, entire lineups of rookies or entire lineups of G League players or entire lineups of one position sometimes, a lot of guards. It was a terrible watch. For the average NBA fan, you're just watching your team or you're just watching the heavyweight matchups, the playoffs. You don't see what was going on behind the scenes for an entire season. And I understand that. Something had to be done, though. It just did because teams were just completely forfeiting matches. We had teams going into the season back in June after the draft saying this was going to be the year that we try and lose as many games as possible. We had teams pre-booking a plane to Cancun in June. We can't have that for parity in the league. We just cannot have teams trying to screw up their season for a chance at a number one pick. That being said, I really wanted to see some sort of way to incentivize winning. And this system doesn't incentivize winning. It disincentivizes losing, and you may say, right, that's sort of the same thing. But no, it's really not. Teams are still going to be losing games. There's going to be a free-for-all, a battle at the end of the season to try and win games to get out of those bottom three spots so that you have that one extra ball, right? So there's going to be winning at the end of the season, right? But that doesn't really matter, right? You want teams competing for the entire season. You're not going to have teams competing because you can still lose games, right? You're still going to try and be a 5 through, 7, 5 through 8 team in terms of worst, right? You're still going to try and be a bottom 5 through 7 team to get your chances of getting a number one overall pick, right? They're still going to be losing, but you're going to get rid of teams that are trying to lose from all the way back in June. You're going to get rid of those teams that have already made up their mind on how the season is going to go, right? You want teams, if they're going to be drafting or at least tanking for a number one overall pick, you want that to be a mid-season decision after injuries, after your season's gone wrong, right? You don't want that to be the notion coming into the season. That makes for terrible watch for your teams. That makes for terrible, marketing for the NBA. We had the Washington Wizards and the Utah Jazz that did a great job this year of getting some draft picks, but also training for star players and improving their roster so that next year they can get out of this system. But we're still going to have teams like the Sacramento Kings, possibly the New Orleans Pelicans, that need a draft pick, especially after how this lottery went for them. But now, we're not going to get those teams doing that. Now, they're still going to be bad, but they're going to be trying to win because it doesn't make any sense for them to try and lose games right off the bat. Now, they're going to lose a lot of games. Those are probably the two worst teams in the league. Maybe not the Pelicans. The Pelicans have a lot of talent if Zion Williamson is able to stay healthy, but most definitely the Kings. So, What does this mean? It means that the Celtics are going to have a harder time trading for, maybe it's a Giannis or maybe it's something else, because you don't know now how those draft picks that you'll be giving up, or getting back potentially depending on the trades, right? You don't know how those draft picks are going to end up, right? You knew before that there was a certain spot that they would land, or a good percentage that they would be a bottom 5, a bottom 10, whatever it means, right? You knew a certain chance that they would land in this spot when you're trading. But now you have no idea, because there's such a wide range from 4 all the way up to 12, where you could get 2 balls and have a chance of getting the number 1 overall pick, right? You don't know where those teams are going to land. It's so random now. This system has, not only has it, disincentivized tanking, but it's almost completely flattened the odds, with teams only have an 8% chance now of getting the number 1 overall pick, and teams that, are the biggest losers, the bottom 3 teams, have even less of a chance. So you try and go out and trade for Giannis and they ask for picks. What are those picks? Especially if it's a Celtics team that is usually competitive. Now, it could be that Celtics have a bad season and they're in the play-in, and you have a chance of getting the number 1 overall pick. But more than likely, they'll be out of the lottery, right? So if you're a Celtics fan, and I'm not saying I want to trade for Giannis. We've already done plenty of talk on that, and I've given my opinions. You can go check those out. But if they were to do that, what do the Bucks want back, or another team? Are they asking for players over draft picks? And that really hurts the Celtics. We don't want to be trading away our young assets, or even a Derek White, right? We don't want to be trading away those guys, right? There's going to be one guy, maybe Jaylen Brown. You don't want to have to trade away multiple guys, especially as you try and build up the depth around what's going to be a really top-heavy salary team if you go and trade for a Giannis. It already is a top-heavy team with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Draft picks might not be available to give up, though, because teams don't want that. They don't know where they're going to land. It's going to make it really hard to do trades out into the future. I think there's going to be, teams are not going to trade for draft picks that are more than 2 or 3 years out, right? And that makes it really hard to try and keep your draft picks and continue to build on a young championship core growing up. It's going to be really hard to do that if you're any team, right? And I really think, I don't know if it's like Adam Silver really loves the relegation, what we see in soccer in Europe and whatever, right? It's not really a relegation, because you can't relegate teams to the G League. You just can't do that. But the hurting of these bottom 3 teams is sort of like a relegation. That's what people are calling it. And to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of this system. It's really confusing on where picks land. Another thing that is sort of completely separate from this system, but Adam Silver now has almost complete control on what he can do to teams. If you are found tanking in the season, he can take away picks. He can, hurt where you're drafting. He can sort of slot you into a bad drafting order. Owners have now given Adam Silver almost complete control over their teams, right? And I think part of the reason why owners signed off on this is because it's going to force, teams to be really careful about their salary cap and how they manage their players' salaries and all of that, their roster. And that's going to keep costs down for the most part. That's why I think owners voted off on this. But I don't think they paid enough attention to what Adam Silver can now do. The second round of the draft is now going to be this reverse order of the first round draft, sort of like a snake draft, which is kind of weird. But then Adam Silver has the ability to move teams around out of order based on what they do in the regular season, or sort of if he feels like it, right? If he finds that, you're tanking in the regular season despite all these new reasons not to tank, is he now going to go and penalize your team? That's kind of scary to have a commissioner that can now do that. And I don't expect him to do that, right? There are lots of controversies on Adam Silver. Personally, I think he's done an okay job of trying to implement some new things into the league, trying to get some excitement up, trying to stop what has been a bad watch for the last 2 seasons in particular, right? This tanking, and everybody's over exaggerating to this season, obviously, because of how good the draft is, right? It's gonna go down the next season, right? But something still has to be done because it's always been a problem, right? And you can't just get rid of the lottery completely. You have to at least try and incentivize winning. And this is not the perfect solution. It's a sunset whatever rule, so they're gonna evaluate it for 3 years and then they'll reassess. And there might be tweaks. They might keep it. They might scrap it completely. We'll give it some time to see how it plays out. It's not going into effect for this draft. It'll start for next draft, but it does mean the teams are going to have to rethink about how they trade draft picks on draft night. Giannis deal, maybe all of that stuff. It's going to impact the Celtics and how they go about their business for the next couple of seasons.